Non-recourse debt. Non-recourse debt or a non-recourse loan, sometimes hyphenated as non-recourse, is a secured loan, debt, that is secured by a pledge of collateral, typically real property, but for which the borrower is not personally liable. If the borrower defaults, the lender can seize and sell the collateral, but if the collateral sells for less than the debt, the lender cannot seek that deficiency balance from the borrower. Its recovery is limited only to the value of the collateral. Thus, non-recourse debt is typically limited to 50% or 60% loan-to-value ratios, so that the property itself provides over-collateralization of the loan. The incentives for the parties are at an intermediate position between those of a full recourse secured loan and a totally unsecured loan. While the borrower is in first loss position, the lender also assumes significant risk, so the lender must underwrite the loan with much more care than in a full recourse loan. This typically requires that the lender have significant domain expertise and financial modeling expertise. Consumer finance. In Europe, mortgage loans secured by personal residences are usually recourse loans. Most states in the United States also permit recourse for residential mortgages, but anti-deficiency statutes in a minority of states require non-recourse mortgages. Around 13 states can be classified as non-recourse states, depending on a researcher's classification standards. Self-directed IRA investors who choose to purchase investment real estate are able to leverage their purchase with a non-recourse loan. Due to Internal Revenue Service regulations, it would be deemed a violation of the qualified retirement account status to personally guarantee any loan on real estate owned by a self-directed IRA. A property-assessed clean energy (PACE) loan, used by some states to fund residential energy improvements, is an example of a loan that is non-recourse to the borrower. Commercial lending. Non-recourse debt is typically used to finance commercial real estate, shipping, or other projects with high capital expenditures, long loan periods, and uncertain revenue streams. It is also commonly used for stock loans and other securities collateralized lending structures. Since most commercial real estate is owned in a partnership structure, or similar tax pass-through, non-recourse borrowing gives the real estate owner the tax benefits of a tax pass-through partnership structure, that is, loss pass-through and no double taxation, and simultaneously limits personal liability to the value of the investment. A non-recourse debt of $30 billion was issued to J.P. Morgan Chase by the Federal Reserve in order to purchase Bear Stearns on March 16, 2008. The non-recourse loan was issued with Bear Stearns' less liquid assets as collateral, meaning that the Federal Reserve will absorb the loss should the value of those assets be below their collateralized value. The legal financing industry provides non-recourse financial products used to provide financial assistance to plaintiffs involved in a contingency-based lawsuit like a car accident. The funds are provided to the consumer on the potential settlement amount. This money is true non-recourse funding. If the case is lost, one does not owe the company funding the lawsuit anything. This is a purchase of an asset and not a loan. Characterization in corporate finance. Non-recourse debt is usually carried on a debtor company's balance sheet as a liability, and the collateral is carried as an asset. For U.S. federal income tax purposes, the interaction among the concepts of 1. The amount realized upon a disposition, 2. The amount of non-recourse debt, and 3. The amount of adjusted basis in the property is fairly complex. The tax consequences of a disposition depend on whether the taxpayer acquired the property with the non-recourse debt already attached, or whether the taxpayer took out the non-recourse debt after acquisition of the property, and the relative relationships between fair market value and purchase price and disposition price. Upon a sale or other disposition of property under U.S. income tax law, a taxable gain generally results where the amount realized upon the sale or other disposition of property exceeds the amount of the taxpayer's adjusted basis in that property. Generally, the amount realized is the amount of cash and other consideration received by the taxpayer. The amount of any loan forgiven or discharged is generally part of that consideration. The adjusted basis is the sum of the following. If the amount realized exceeds the amount of adjusted basis, The taxpayer has realized a gain at the time of disposition. If the adjusted basis exceeds the amount realized, a loss has been incurred. The federal income tax effect of non-recourse debt may be explained by first considering the tax effect of a disposition involving recourse debt, that is, a debt in which the property provides first security coverage, and the borrower/taxpayer is personally liable for any deficiency that may remain after the lender forecloses against the property, and then contrasting against similar facts involving non-recourse debt, as follows. As an example, suppose, assuming that the creditor forecloses on the property and that the $20,000 excess of the debt over the property's fair market value, $100,000 less $80,000, is contractually discharged. For didactic symmetry with the non-recourse example, let's assume, contrary to the commercial point of a recourse loan, that the debt is outright forgiven by the creditor, with no actual payment. The taxpayer would realize the $20,000 amount as income from the discharge of indebtedness. That $20,000 of forgiveness would be taxable to the taxpayer as ordinary income even though the taxpayer received no cash at the time of the discharge. The $35,000 excess of the fair market value over the adjusted basis, $80,000 less $45,000, would be treated as a taxable capital gain on the sale or other disposition of the property, again, even though the taxpayer received no cash at the time of the foreclosure. Assuming the same facts except that the debt is non-recourse, the result would be quite different. The taxpayer would realize zero taxable ordinary income from the discharge of debt. Instead, the entire $55,000 difference between the unpaid principal of the debt and the taxpayer's adjusted basis, $100,000 less $45,000, would be treated as a taxable capital gain on the sale or other disposition of the property, again, even though no cash is received by the taxpayer at the time of foreclosure. At the sale, foreclosure or other disposition, non-recourse debt incurred as part of the financing of the acquisition, and money extracted from an investment by mortgaging out, are treated the same. Both are taxable realization only at the time of the property's disposition, even if, at time of disposition, the property is worth less than the amount of the mortgage. Non-recourse debt that is in place at the time of acquisition of the property is included in basis, Crane v. Commissioner. Subsequent borrowing is not. Woodson Associates Incorporated v. Commissioner. Subsequent borrowing precedes reinvested in a depreciable property, thereby avoid Woodson and take advantage of Crane.